Good evening, welcome. My name is Jesse Lazar. I'm the Executive Director here at AI New York, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to tonight's event, Yatin Pandya, Designing for People, Place, and Planet. I want to thank the committee co-organizers of this event, of which there are 4. The Design for Risk and Reconstruction Committee, the Diversity Inclusion Committee, the Interiors Committee, and the Social Science and Architecture Committee, and also especially to lead organizer Eric Gearing. Here at the AI New York chapter, our committees are really the lifeblood of what we do. They plan many of the events that you hear about and come see in this space here. It's really wonderful to have a group of them collaborating on something like this tonight, something we're hoping to see more of in the future, is those collaborations between those groups. So it's a wonderful example of that, and I thank all of them for their work on this. We are pleased to host Mr. Pandya tonight to hear more about his work in cultural celebrations, interior and sustainable design, along with his publications about humane design. I'd also like to thank our sponsor for tonight's event, Seema Lisa Pandya, Sustainable Art and Design. We are grateful for the support. And now please welcome Eric Gearing, who will introduce our speaker for the evening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jesse, for that. Really appreciate that introduction. And definitely, it's very important to acknowledge all the committee members that join us in here. Like Jesse said, the Design for Risk and Reconstruction, of which Yutaka Takiura is co-host, co-chair, and also Kimberly Saw, I think she's here also, the co-chair of that as well, along with Michael Woods is on that committee, and Donna Walkovich. They kind of work with us to help bring this together. It takes a lot of work to put all this together, so we appreciate everybody's efforts. And it does take several committees, and all of the committees are involved with the work that Yatin does. Design, the Committee for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, for instance, very important committee, and a very important idea, by the way, diversity and inclusion. It's not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing. And we have Priyanka Jain as a co-chair of that, and also Eric Chu, so I'd like to thank them for their participation. And we also have the Social Science and Architecture Committee helping us as well, which is also something that Yatin's work is addressing. So that is the co-chairs Kwan Ju Chen, which thank you very much, and Nadine Berger. So we appreciate their efforts in bringing all this together. It takes a lot of work to put this together. We do appreciate that. And also, again, as Jesse said, to acknowledge Seema Lisa Pandya, Yatin's niece, who is an environmental artist here in New York, and also a fellow colleague at the New York School of Interior Design. So shout out to the students. Thank you for that. So Yatin is many things, not just an architect. He's an author, he's an academician, he's a researcher. He does all these things along with his practice called Footprints Earth, which is really environment, architecture, research, technology, and housing. All these elements that go into his practice, which is very important. And he started his career over 40 years ago. You know, when he graduated from McGill in 1985, he's been involved with city planning, urban design, mass housing, architecture, interior design, product design, as well as conservation and preservation. And in preservation, he's worked on the restoration of Corbusier's villas, Chaudin and Sarabai, as well as the Mill Owners Association buildings. So serious reconstruction of buildings, that's very important. Now, he also served as Associate Director of the Vastu Shilpa Foundation for Studies and Research in Environmental Design. But that's where he worked closely with Balkrishna Doshi, who you all might remember is like the storied disciple of Le Corbusier and Louis Kahn. So he's associated with that. And since then, since 2008, he's really been principal architect and proprietor of Footprints Earth. So he's won over 40 national and international awards for architectural design, for research, sustainable practice. And he's written hundreds of articles internationally, as well as authoring numerous books, some of which we have right here on sale, Elements of Space Making and Courtyard Houses of India, beautiful book. Some of these books have become curriculum material for architectural courses around the countries. So we'll have the opportunity to look at that. So Yatin has served as also a thesis guide to hundreds of graduate, master's, and PhD students. So he's lectured over 20 countries in over 100 different fora. This is just one of them. He'll be doing that again in another country soon, right? Going back to Australia, right? Yes. Malaysia, yes. Talking on environmental sustainability, socio-cultural appropriateness, timeless aesthetics, and economic affordability. These are all key principles of his work. And these are principles that all of our co-sponsoring committees are associated with and interested in pursuing. So I would like to welcome the esteemed Yatin Pandya here tonight. Thank you all very much for coming, and Yatin, take it away. Thank you.
Very, very good evening. Thank you for that generous introduction. Indeed grateful to AIA and the committee for having me here. Honored, in fact, and humbled to be in presence of such delightful and practicing architects. And actually looking forward to, I'm putting one kind of position or bias from my own, but I'm very glad and in fact looking forward to some discussion. So, just the kind of pitch that is already there in the title, that we think that as a designer, we have a larger obligation, not to your client, but I think we have to look at the place, people, and planet. I always say it's like doctor, that, doctor looks at the patient, but actually, cures it rather than treats it. And for that, he has to go into the whole bit of that. And our goal in design has to be to create humane, sustainable, and timeless built environment. So with that, let me begin by one sort of ancient story of what it takes to become an architect. So one pupil goes to the master and says that, teach me architecture. And the architect typically are known to pass the buck. So they say that unless you know the dance, sculpting, I can't teach you architecture because it's all about the form, the mass, proportion. So you must first be a sculptor. He goes to a sculptor, and sculptor sends him further saying that, without dance, how can you know sculpting? Because it's about body form, it's about the kind of expressions and stuff like that. He goes to a sculptor, and sculptors say, without dance, it is not possible. He goes to a dancer, and dancer says, without music, there's no dance. It's about pause, rhythm, and you must be understanding all that and sensitive to that. Goes to a musician, and musicians say it's just not sounds. There is always an expression of the word, so you have to become a poet. And he goes to a poet, and poet says, son, how can I teach poetry? You just live life, be with people, and be in nature, and it's poetry all around, And that is exactly what probably we learned a little hard way through pandemic. I say that pandemic has been able to change some of this paradigm shift of the notions and the values that we held. And therefore, I thought that actually we should take it positively. Rather than referring to the time frame of BC and AD, maybe we should call it BC and AC, before Corona and after Corona, because I think it taught us a lot of these values of humanity, equality, frugality, sustainability. And it basically came down to convince us that any development, if it bases itself on these two fundamental equilibrium, human to human symbiosis and human to nature, then it can never be out of fashion or not out of sync, And it also gave us a lot of hope. We thought that we had far too many people on this planet and things are irreversible. But I think just 2 months of undue system taken out of the circulation, and the nature could correct itself. And that, I think, has become an obligation for us to keep it maintained that way. And I think it settled forever this debate about technology versus nature, indoors versus outdoors. We all valued that very well. And from that perspective, I'm just putting a kind of a mirror to our own kind of policies that had been earlier been governed by this notion of smart cities. There's nothing other than smart that any dictionary would refer to it as. But if these happen to be the images to be guided by what we call smart cities, then one wonders, it really a vision or it just remains a slogan, The way we've been building around the globe, we don't have time for the quiz, but can we even spot 4 places where they come from? And I put names from anything, anywhere. Of course, these are true, but I mean, I could have fooled around, put any names, and it would have still worked. And I think in India, we are not that far. Look at this, how diverse cultural context, historic context, geographic context, environmental context, and still the outcome is just about the same. Both of these are contemporary Kerala. We need to understand which Kerala is appropriate for us, which Jaipur should we be looking for, and which Kolkata should we be emulating and taking it further. And that's what brings us to this kind of a contradiction of the terms, or image versus identity. And again, I think Corona did teach us very well what to be presented with in the screen versus what we felt comfortable about. Image is what we want others to perceive us as, while identity is who truly we are. So then the context that I operate from, what really is the true DNA of that particular place? Is it judging the book by the cover, the kind of images that we think are what it is, or it is something much further? And for Indian context, I use these 2 terms as not synonyms, history and tradition, but kind of opposite. Both may have come from the past, but to me, history remains to be a dead tradition, while tradition remains to be a living history. When something becomes obsolete for the changed time and circumstance, it dies its own death, and that's a fossilized past, kind of yesterday. But something that comes from yesterday but continues to be part of us today, its own survival is a proof of those values being shared even in contemporary times. And I think in India, therefore, we piggy ride past into present. And that's why we simultaneously live in 3 time zones, moving from the past and aspirations for tomorrow, coexist to create realities of today. I mean, this picture is from the 6th largest city in the country, Ahmedabad. And look at this, it's kind of advertising for being a global citizen. It says, come study in Australia, but in a very cost-effective way, and yet in its functional, effective way of having a very archaic medium of camel cart running around and doing that. So the kind of quality that signifies India is the idea of collective sharing and caring. There are many cultures where individuality or identity is respected. There's an added obligation of collective conformity. And especially in architecture, we need to learn that how can we have single resolution that resonates with people over time and with diverse values to use the same space again. And the kind of, principle that we chose for that pluralism in 3 different kind of aspects that I'll kind of come to that is the idea of multiple choices or multiple truths. So diverse values. If there's a single truth, maybe people won't agree to one. But if you allow for that to be, for example, where you reach is more important than who takes you there. As many people, as many gods. 6 yard sari, a cloth that can be worn as diversely as well as it looks different on different body contours. So attire. And my favorite interpretation is that of the concept of combination meal as thali. I love pizza and I've enjoyed New York pizza all along. So it's not the kind of a menu that I'm talking about. The principle of complete meal versus a composite or the combination meal. In pizza, you are happy to exercise your choice of the crust, of the cheese, of the toppings, but once cooked, first bite tastes the same as the next, tastes the same as the last. And you eat the same pizza as I do, we can share the experience of food alike. Turn it around to thali. It's a completely cooked ingredient, a diverse ingredient. But first pluralism is that you are the designer of every bite. So every bite is a unique combination. First bite did not taste the same as the last. And you eat the same thali as I do. We cannot compare the experience of food alike because my sequence may be different, my combination may be different, my proportion may be different. So it's not about the menu, but it's about the kind of principle of being able to leave something to the user, to the end person, so that he can make it his own or her own. And with the same kind of principle, so if somebody asks what is an Indian food, I think I'll be insulting as many provinces if I put the kind of 4 names into that. But that concept works all across, and with that concept, you can find as diverse a kind of outcome with same sort of principle, but totally different tastes and whatnot. So the point is that design is not about finding one answer to one question. It's about asking many questions, finding many answers to each questions, and then picking one answer that answers most questions. So it's an ability to discern between appropriate and inappropriate. Once again, I bring simile to that of a doctor. Doctor doesn't pre-decide that, oh, enough of corona, maybe now malaria or now, It's just on the basis of what that patients look like. So what appropriateness? Appropriateness to the context in terms of place, people, and planet. And therefore, it's all about discretion and adding value. That's the kind of role we carry. So if that was the definition of a holistic design, do these examples stand to that, that if a child is dirtying the attire by crawling around the floor, we don't design the attire to be a mop that let him go around and sweep the floor. That's too quick, too singular, and too kind of abrupt. The shoe is more expensive than yourself and have therefore a shelter to that. Control Alt Delete through a single stroke, and hot noodles need to be fast cooled so you have a fan to go with. And as architect, I think we're not too behind. But I think our legacies precede us. People think we're too creative, so they tend to still find some meaning into what might be our mistakes. So we make blunders, and I think then we do PhD to try and understand these mistakes, not even solve it. So the point is design has to add value, and that being whether aesthetic, whether cost, whether environment, whether humor or whatnot. Why can't even toilets be like a throne? I love this toilet designed from aircrafts, very light, three-dimensionally optimized partially, and I think it functions in every other way. So product for the value added. So it should function, that's regardless, but how does it inform, involve, and inspire? Just the series of, here, the switches. So the one makes you aware about keeping it too long, that the smiling face of the ghost starts becoming frowning, and it reminds you maybe it's on for too long. In Ahmedabad, we are supposed to be penny pincher, and that's a special series for us. Every time you have to put on the light, we put the coin, and then we become very kind of concerned and conscious. Oh, it's a full moon day, let's not use the electricity, let's eat out and whatnot. This is below, maybe in England, that there are no peons or helpers. Every time you put a hat, it comes off. And without anybody, it should go off with the suit. And maybe the top right is the romantic French saying, "Can I turn you on?" The product, we believe in incarnation. Why can't the product that by the time it comes from Amazon or place, it's already either outdated or it's gone defunct? Can we not think of a secondary use to design? And which was the legacy way back in 70s with this Heineken beer bottle called Whoa Whoa, where the beer bottle were in a squarish form with serration. So once you go high in spirits, let that be the brick in the wall, and let wall be high. So technology is a tool. This is not a kind of contradiction when in a desert, you have to keep the medicine refrigerated to transport across. This is a very convenient and appropriate thing. So design or sustainability is all about contextual adjustment with the list without harming. How can you do the best? And that's where I think there's a little kind of, I'm biased towards the right-hand side than the left-hand side. Like, for example, any laptop, but with an added layer of a bamboo chip, I call it a green laptop. Or Mr. Wally Broecker that coined the term global warming for the planet, probably doing billion-dollar project of oxygenating the planet. Could natural seeding of plants not do that? I think at least for our context in India, what we need is the answer like the right one. That like this Africa, children are playing very voluntarily, turning the wheel for merry-go-round, but mechanically that's been connected to the underground water source, and it lifts it up to the overhead tank, and 24/7 you get that water. So the point is we need to develop norms and standards which are related or rooted to the place and its people, both in terms of its reality as well as aspirations. And I once again bring in Corona, that we understood the value of multiple use of space, not kind of stretching it too far and all, but very soon we seem to be forgetting that. Could we not evolve a new norm that minimum is beautiful? And picking from alien context, we end up into this disaster, that's what is happening in the developing countries. So when we mindlessly copy from the single source, it's usually plagiarism, it's aping, but we smartly copy from 100 sources, it's adapting, and often we get doctorate for that. Any development must go to, any design must go through the 6 basic criteria or the concerns or the lenses. Timeless aesthetic, because buildings last beyond us; sociocultural appropriateness, because it's always for people to use; environmental sustainability or resource management, because our decisions have far-reaching implications; functional efficiency, basically that's what you call for; economic affordability, without that it won't be even viable; and structural stability, because if the building has to last long, so it has to be stable and secure. So if I take off these 6, just first 3 to be here for discussion: timeless aesthetics. What are the principles? Why do we go often to the ruins which are not even complete, and yet we pay money to visit there over and over? They have sort of kind of demonstrated this idea of exalting the time and remain fresh and timeless in our experience of that. So this is one example I'm putting, which to me I think encompasses all of these principles of sustainability, of functionality, of aesthetics, etc. This is a stepped well, even as a concept in a hot, dry climate where there is no perennial river or 365 kind of a water source. You actually dig a very small hole into the ground and tap the first aquifer running at about 60 feet below. So it's a small hole, so it doesn't lose by evaporation. You make steps to reach up to the water. So Muhammad goes to mountain in that case. And note, so that earth doesn't cave in, you have the retaining wall with the shoring and strutting of a tributed construction. So that's a simple story. But what's not simple, and these are the plan sections and exono, but I think this doesn't give justice to the experiential quality that we have. And that's where I say that it's not a diagram that makes a design or architecture. How does it connect to the onlooker, and how does it decode? Design is a dialogue, whereas an architect or designer, we encode the set of clues, and that is what, through encounters that we create, the junctures we create, the perceiver decode. So he's involved in the process. And I think that's what I would like to mention here, that the journey of simply fetching water below ground, how does it, from middle of nowhere, there are 2 outcrop of stone, and that invites you, that look, and the steps that says, oh, I am here. Look at the irony. In order to go down, you need to climb up, okay? Now, you don't know till then what's coming further. So that gives you a little curiosity. That gives you engagement. It's like a treasure hunt, that till that one set of elements gave you the clue of what was it about. The moment you take that step up, now you see the void. Okay, you still don't know the water, etc. Then it's open to sky, so the element of sun with that void comes in, and that becomes a visual focus drawn to that. Now 3 sides, you're surrounded by the steps. You come more or less 1 floor down, so you turn to the 4th side, and 4th side you get this beautiful panoramic view. I call it invitational hug from the monument. Welcome to my precinct, It tells you, I'm so long, I'm that far, but you're not a crow to fly. So you have to take an architectural design element called stair. And stair, every step, you're transposed horizontally and vertically. And therefore, your point of view is different at every step. So again, like the bite of thali, look at this very first platform, and the same space feels like a big parapet terrace. You have still bright sun, you can see sky, there's less sense of enclosure, and you're kind of still brought into one kind of a light intensity and space. Left-hand side, another floor down, it starts feeling like a room with slight diffusion of light, and still go down, and now it feels like an enclosed space, so it feels as if you're being sucked into the well. So every platform, what changes is the intensity of light, sense of enclosure, and your visual construct. And if you are too perceptive, even the temperature reduces in a hot climate as you go down. And therefore, many of these structures also accommodated kings and queens' chambers within them, you know. Now, like Thali, if you walk straight, diagrammatically, it was symmetrical and boring steps. But as you see, there's nothing boring about it. And if you walked inclined, that was your experience, you know, experientially engaging architecture. You have to be there. It's like a food, unless you taste it, there's nothing that you experience, you know. So same way, you being there and you encountering the junctures accordingly is your experience, you know. So each one can have their own experience of the space. This is not symmetrical because you walk that way, somebody walks straight, then it's symmetrical, and likewise. So each one carries their own experience at their own pace. And only at the last platform the water is revealed. So water was merely an excuse. It was just the essence was in the journey. And that's something if we understand that architecture is about kinesthetics, perception and movement, and therefore there is this dynamics of that, and therefore as pacemaker we choreograph the journey, the movement, the space, okay? And this also, if you see that there are steps around that. So for women who are doing this mundane chore, carrying 6-story the water up, could actually sit around and gossip, bitch about their husbands and mothers-in-law. And so it becomes a social space, and even the floors above becomes a resting place for the caravan travelers to kind of, in a hot climate, rest in the afternoon and go. And then this duality of water and sky and stuff like that. There are many notions, but I'll skip that. So this is also having notional connect. So as I say that spatially, physically, and notionally when architecture connects, then it's a complete kind of experience and bond. Of course, this is culturally specific. The earlier sequence was humanly universal. So we have two associations with this step well. One going to the womb of Mother Earth, and therefore you see the mother goddess and all that, the fertility symbols, and going to our tripartite division, heaven in the sky, earth on the ground, and below earth, the netherlands, the water world. And therefore you see a lot of symbols about water. For example, the very first frame, visual frame, starts with Ganesha, which marks for us the auspicious beginning, ends with that of a motif of a fish, reminding you that you come into the water world. And it's not a monopoly of just one kind of place and architecture. It's the principle we're talking about. And even Mr. Corbusier's idea of promenade architectural is just about the same. This is in our own city. In fact, we ended up restoring this as well. It was quite dilapidated. It's been 75 years now. So this was, as you see, Mill Owners Association building that from a neutral facade, like a frog's tongue, the ramp kind of first swallows you in. And smartly that time, the sort of, you see there, the stair is hidden. So you know, and ramp, basically you walk by default you are ascending. So it's not a conscious ascent. And therefore, when you come at the so-called first floor, it feels like a rival ground. And the ground feels like basement. There's a little trailer by that window that tells you what's coming further with the light and whatnot, but it baffles what's coming further first for you. Then you go around with the light, and that's where you come into this space, and Mr. Doshi explained how they took several days to come around this little rounded sort of a bench in this and whatnot. Now from there, when you come, there is also this, on a sort of a gridded structural geometry, there's a free-flowing toilet which just looks like a wraparound plane. You don't know the third dimension yet. And now that when you finish that flow circuit, now the stair reveals to you. Till that it was hidden, and now ramp is forgotten. Then you climb up, and now there's a small gateway sort of an idea, and you cut through, and you get another sort of a staircase. So you've already come to the third way of transiting vertically. And that is a very sculptural, because in the middle of space, now look at the thing here, that on this floor, the toilet, like the previous slide, is just a wraparound floor from the floor level. But when you climb the stair from the mezzanine, it becomes like three-dimensional sculpture within a larger void. So same object, but you being given different positions in the space, it comes across very differently. And then, of course, earlier, the opening slide was the western one where the direct sun is thwarted by his typical element, brise soleil, the lures. And this is a view towards the water. And sun and the vegetation are constantly changing. We restored this vegetation, it was all gone, and we conserved this building and put a permanent museum also on Corbusier there. So the point is that building is static, but when you include nature in, it's constantly dynamic and fresh. And that's why 75 years later, functionally obsolete. Both the buildings I showed are functionally obsolete because in the previous one, the archaeology has stopped anybody going to the water. And here, there hardly much function except for one or two offices. So what we carry back is what is important. That in my book, that Concepts of, I've derived this 6 principles of experientially engaging architecture, doesn't matter where. First, disparate visual and physical access. You know where you have to go. So it's not a stressful labyrinth. You know, but sightline need not be the line of movement. It's made a little bit with many encounters. So it's a story of sequential unfolding to keep you engaged, to keep you curious, and more important, keep you part of the game. You are the decoder, and therefore you being there to decode that is what is expected of that. And therefore it's like an onion or a cabbage that it's just all layers. If you peel all, there's nothing. So the whole essence is in layering that off. And you can see all these examples, including the Islamic architecture, we've been told it's all symmetrical. But with landscape feature like water or vegetation, you can't walk straight. So you're made to go around and therefore perceive the same thing in its very dynamic way. Uh, Multiple choices, again, we talked about thali, so that again, you reach to the same destination, but your path can be of your choice eventually. So here, you can come from anywhere and you eventually go there. And therefore, movement is the whole key. It's like a cinema or whatever. Flow as well as encounters is what, as your idea of kinesthetic perception is about. And in that, the kind of junctures that you create. For example, Taj Mahal, basically the gate from where you first get the sight of Taj Mahal, I say from a labyrinthine street of the, Agra, you get this Dhantaran moment at this point, and it's exactly framed at the Shah Jahan gate to see that Taj Mahal is just about framed with 4 minaret, cube, and the dome is the abstraction that you have. But look at this, then on the axis, there's water, and it's the level difference. So actually you're made to move around. At one point, you're brought in the center and you get this perspectival alignment to kind of hold the crown of the Taj Mahal. But after that, you've forgotten all those minarets. And just when you're taking the staircase up, which is not symmetrical on the axis, it's other way around, now, one minaret gets framed in exactly similar arched vault. And that's fantastic recall that remember there were 4 minarets, I'm one and I'm going to now connect you to Mumtaz. So I think those are the kind of excitements or the encounters one's talking about. As I said, building is static, but if you integrate nature, that would constantly be changing, and that's one of the qualities of timeless architecture, that we need to think about nature in terms of light, vegetation, water, people, and activity. Notion gets ruled, often overrule the physical reality. For example, we have self-assumed social duty of painting the public corridor red with the pan spits, unfortunately. And no amount of warning signs can actually thwart that. But if you put the icons of gods and goddesses, it just becomes now a shrine. So the dead corner has now transformed into another perceived reality, and then that stops that misbehavior. Second point about sociocultural appropriateness, there was a study in Japan that revealed that if you have informal, casual dressing allowed to the superior CEOs of the company, they would feel the same level of comfort rather than ties, tuxedo, and 3-piece suit by few degree warmer AC temperature. So it was undue comfort created by the undue dressing. So if in the hot and humid climate like Kerala and all Chennai and all, if people are bare-chested and wearing a single loincloth, are they primitive or they are the most appropriately dressed for that context? We knew Gandhi, he was eternal, who could veil and unveil and still preserve his modesty. Do we need that, or we want Gandhi to toe a line when it's cool in summer or hot in winter? So design-wise, the kind of mistakes by not understanding cultural context we make, all three are narrow lanes, but the extreme left is a traditional one where you can see there are doors and other accesses, and therefore it's interactive and it celebrates positive festivities. As against the middle one, which is by the bylaw to have a kind of a, sort of service lane to have improved quality of environment, but there's only window and kitchen arguably. From there you throw all your muck out and it becomes actually the reason to degenerate the environment. All you needed to do was turn window into a door, and then you would have fantastic backyard and nobody would misbehave and they would on their own maintain it. There's a street in my own city, which is now World Heritage Site. There's a blurred interface between what is house and what is outdoor, and it's all kind of extended. Here, by law, 15% open space is left, but it doesn't connect to the build, not even by window, and therefore remains idle and abused. Too large a space fails to create that rapport, and therefore, even though provided, remains idle. And it's not the money, it's the mindset. On left-hand side, you see just at the junction of movement, a plinth and a tree becomes a very successful public open space at no money. While on the right, it's a colonial, beautiful building in Ballard Estate in Mumbai. And trust me, it can compete even after dollar conversion to New York real estate prices. But that attitude, you can see a pipe at the back over a window, which means have nothing to do with that, has relegated this priceless real estate into not to be kind of a space. We had a traditional system. It is still functioning 6th century later in my city. Early morning, an urban paved plaza, a thick marketplace, is a cow grazing ground. Afternoon is an intense business district, formal and informal, and at night it's a kind of outdoor eatery because as much hot it is through the day, it's very comfortable through the night. So the kind of principles that we learn from yesterday's architecture, it's not to romanticize the past, but for three performance reasons, at least in our context, we can learn from that. One, even today, if you like that aesthetic, then the principles of timeless architecture. Second, they have been for people, by people, so they're close to the ways of life of the people. That's how they emerge, so we can refer to that. And third, more importantly, they were pre-electricity days. So even simply by the built form, if they were able to get the good environmental comfort and conditions, why not learn from that? So what were those strategies? As we know, architectural kind of or building industry accounts for 42% of energy consumption, very high proportion of resource consumption, and equally high pollutants that we create. So I think the humility rhymes with sustainability, and that's basically to understand that it's not preconceived ego that we should design something with. This, unfortunately, is from my own city where I don't know what is, somebody can say centigrade, but I think it's 118 or so, 47 degree, 45 degree last few weeks we had centigrade. I think it roughly translated 118 plus. And south-facing facade with full glazed structure. Not only inside might be an oven. First I thought it was a biscuit factory and the whole thing was an oven. Then I realized that it is actually a maternity home. Maybe we produce babies faster than biscuits. And we think technology is an answer. Like you see that if you take a transparent glazing and whole, heat kind of transmission to be of 100% by double glazing, reduced by 10 more percent, tinted glass, bring it to 40%. But simple common sense, 1 meter awning on such sides would already give you shade even though you have glazing. So, and this is next to my house, and for 15 years I've observed that they have repainted the building but not removed this west-facing glazed facade without this cloth awning. And again, my suspicion is that person is in coma since first electricity bill. This wisdom was that insulation by thick mass or by storage on the exterior envelope, etc., both cold and hot climate, it worked. But in India, insulation must go with ventilation because all of us emit 75 kilowatt energy, so does equipment, so that has to be evacuated. So ventilation must go with insulation, and that's why this multi-tiered roof, cross ventilation, clear story windows, outdoor spaces as living spaces, whether they're courtyards as documented in my book, as well as the open spaces, terraces, etc. Fenestration design, this was Mashrabiya's jalis as we call it, the screened wall, and that had fantastic functional, aesthetic, etc., and climatic reasons. First, aesthetic. In fact, left-hand side is the screen of one of the tombs, and our city is recognized or identified through this by default. Every time there's a seminar, you would find that to be the identity thing. Second, this one, in a hot climate, works with Venturi principle to enhance the breeze. It goes through small aperture and the wind picks up velocity, so the positive pressure is created. Bernoulli principle, that's a warm breath, is a cool breath. So that also helps micro cool that. Then one-way privacy, cultural performance. From inside you know everything out, but from outside you don't know because of the light difference what's going on inside. And last, of course, it cuts down the glare, but not the illumination. So haze and glare is cut down, but illumination is got. So very functional and very aesthetic kind of element. And we had a British architect, Laurie Baker, who made India his home, and he in South created all this architecture around the perforations as aesthetic, functional, as well as climatic element. And traditional architecture always, rather than, like Thali, gave you permutation and combination. You know, wind comes from Vindra Oga, eye of the wind. So flat, fixed glazing doesn't justify that. So top one is for ventilator, middle one for a view and the gossip, and lower one for the breeze to come in. And you can permute and combine as per your need at the time of the year likewise. In India, we have a very high sky component. We need ray bands to diffuse the light. So there is also the whole thing of getting an indirect illumination rather than a direct glare. Outdoor is a living space. You're all welcome to visit us on 14th January, which is a kite flying festival. All that happens on the rooftops. And look at this, 2.6 FAR in just 4 to 5 floors. So it's again a notion which is wrong. When we had 1.8 FAR in Ahmedabad, we all started building 11-story. Now we start building 26-story. But this shows dense form, which also because of the, long deep wall, shared wall, had also retarded the undue heat ingress. And the vertically projecting profile, so when sun is overhead, the whole facade is in the shade, and when it goes low, the next building starts sheltering. So these were the kind of traditional wisdom, multiple use of the space. Morning it's for daily chores and socializing, afternoon for the kitty parties and hawkers to come to do business, evening is again watching people, meeting, socializing, etc. Courtyard in a deep long house, right from the first civilization of all the 4 civilizations till today, has been the norm in vernacular architecture, which brings in illumination, not the glare, which brings or evacuates the hot air out, and also makes different floors communicate visually and spatially. And that is the sanctum sanctorium of the house. You only have kitchen and the sacred activity. And look at this, each house harvests rainwater from rooftop, even though meager rainfall, into underground water cistern, and each house is self-sufficient with every whole years with one family drinking and cooking water needs, or all needs at 135 liter per day per person for the summer 2.5 months when we don't have water. It used to be a handcrafted IKEA that one carpenter would have different kinds of components done. And like Thali, again, you permute and combine, and it becomes a unique house to yours. Each house had its own identity, and yet there was an overall conformity, and it could create a very beautiful ensemble at the end. These are beautiful Havelis, wooden carved. And not, as I said, it's a way of life. So even the accessories and furniture, what electrical power helps fan do to cut the air is exactly what you do with the muscle power in this element or furniture piece called swing, that you have evaporated your sweat and it feels body comfort, and it's also flexible that you can remove. And just again a naive thumb rule that warmer the place, spicier the food. So again, you perspire, that helps evaporative cooling, and likewise. So now with that as the lessons that we learn from the traditional and the spontaneous settlements, how do we interpret it in our architecture? All these Rs, and I'll just run through one scale and intervention just as a representation. So first, refuse, that when you don't need, don't do it. This is a project we did for several hundred houses in the urban poor slum squatter settlement, where 3 sides are shared with the neighbor, and it's a deep long house without the traditional courtyard. So last rooms are invariably pitch dark, and with the tin roof, it's an oven. So this one non-government organization for the women had approached us, and we first accidentally came up with this of illuminating the space with just a empty water bottle, and that would work as a bulb. But of course, this will not give ventilation. So eventually, this got accepted, and this is within the cost range that people can afford. And we created this dormer for ventilating the air, and yet translucent one brings natural daylight into the houses. But what is important is that they ran 1 year post-occupancy study, and they found a minimum of 250 rupee savings per house monthly in every house on an average, and minimum of 1500 rupee increase in the domestic house-based economic activity production, because now they could work for longer hours, their eyesights were not strained, and etc. So the point is designed to improve the quality of life of the people. So we started with few houses, and then with its performance, it was taken to even another city in Madhya Pradesh, etc. Poor kids had no excuse not to do their homework now, because now inside was illuminated. Refuse to reuse. India, again, has a lot of these buildings or spaces. It, rather than being demolished, can be put to adaptive reuse. This was the kind of Mr. Gandhi's time. He said that the whole root cause of untouchability is that those people who clean behind you, you're calling them untouchable, inferior. You should be doing it yourself. So he said, let's invest in technologies where people don't have to scavenge after you. So these were some of the alternative sanitation options, but then it got defunct because now things have been moved and sanitized. So we turned it into a space where these become seat and you can see the event. But then we went a little bolder, that the refreshment place there. So it's a toilet cafe. And again, you have a choice of what feels comfortable to you, or you want to try another one. So it's a reminder of the toilets, but change the mindset through design, that whenever we see toilet in India, this is the reflex that you have. So to change that and take it a little more positively, so that was done. All these are the elements that you find from the toilet, the union and T's and junctions. And we've done this 5th one now. So that's more recent, so I've kind of more better pictures of that. Of course, with the wisdom about environment, about people, about that harmony. Reuse again of, this is Corbusier's building, like or not, dilapidated, wasted as such. It should have been monument. It's still not listed officially. This was the devastation. In 97, 99, we got involved voluntarily, and we converted that into permanent museum on city of Ahmedabad, arguably the only with people's participation in the whole country, which represents culture, craft, art, and architecture of the place. And this was all done through people's contribution, because we needed objects, not money, and we didn't have money, except that corporation did allow us to use this space. So that's that. Even here, you know, people didn't know, and this building was really up for sale because it sits on a real estate, which is its own enemy. And that's where we, you know, talked to the president, and he said that. So we, 2011 was 600 year of Ahmedabad city's founding. And we said that people must be aware about the heritage that it inherits, and even this modern heritage. So rather than demolishing, we convinced him, and we put this permanent museum on Corbusier, just for them to know Corbusier as a person, as architect, and his structures in Ahmedabad, including one structure that never got built. So we got models and other things done and put it in his modular grid, so to say. Reduce, I still haven't learned from this slide. This is now coming to interiors. This one where you don't have control on the envelope and all, and still we got the Immersion Cup awards for this design, where they calculated, we don't do much calculation, it's a common sense thing that use maximum daylight, opportunity of being able to look out, diffuse the light when it's glare in that side, natural palette of material, which areas you don't need air conditioning, don't do it. And as far as possible, open the window when the weather outside is fine, indoor plantation to change the quality of air, and nature-inspired detailing. And there we ended up doing 5 extensions. So again, I think client got convinced, and their own observation was that electricity bill was reduced to half uh, moving to this. Redefine, this is now coming to standalone residence. This one is has been included in several 50 designs of residence in India kind of a book. I'm not saying for that. What I'm saying is it was just a common sense principle where aesthetic is an outcome of the kind of principles that you use about sun, wind, water, and vegetation. So they are all natural finishes. It's a twin house with son couple and the parent couple kind of a thing. And you can see brick represents the parent, concrete represents the son, microclimate to water and vegetation, natural palette of materials to go with, open plan with courtyard reinterpreted in present times, cavity wall construction, earthy material to express, no maintenance, and insulation with two-leaf water wall, and which orientation, what mass, and there's no false ceiling. All that modulation is by architectural section, so zero false ceiling, and yet you get different kinds of volumes of space. This courtyard actually houses the water tank. That roof water is all harvested in there, and the play of light. This is a contemporary version of courtyard where you allow for light and ventilation, but not for monkeys and thieves. No chimney. It's a natural ventilation through this, sort of skylight. So hot air, smoke, and smell goes out, and you get very beautiful diffuse light all through the day. And dynamics of light. There's a ferrocement roof and puncture in the roof. So as the sun moves, you get different things. And I think this is one pledge that we have, that in India, craftsmanship is really rich and good. Unless we give patronage to the craftsman, it is going to die. Why would next generation engage with that? So this is the native tribal painters who did this Warli style of painting. So digital craft along with the folk art, and of course the newer techniques and implements to be used. My daily ritual to practice this at home, respond. This is standalone building. And again, east, west, north, south is not the same. All the building you might do symmetrical. So just the kind of orientation decides the envelope type. For example, left is a stair, north for us is a pull side, and that just becomes a new jali form or new kind of mashrabiya form where it's because it was a publishing house or printers kind of a corporate office. So we use this crossword puzzle as a jali. South is more extreme. So we have Ahmedabad's monument recreated in the jali. And the southwest, we are in the opposition. It's good for breeze, but bad for sun. So we have these vertical louvers. There's a second skin so that you can allow for breeze, but not for sun. And again, you get dynamics of light through the day. Even vertical floors are flushed with vegetation. This is still very early, but now it's all covered up. And interactive floors, etc. Recycle now. 3,500 metric ton of waste is produced in city of Ahmedabad alone, and we did 3 years of research. All these projects come after good research of using some of these waste from domestic and municipal sector and converting this into such kind of building components. There's a whole volume of how to do it, and within the cost range, that was our benchmark, that it must be performing better within the cost that alternative material otherwise they use, and of course aesthetically pleasing. Women of the settlement became the generator of their own economy while helping in certain processes, like widow sitting at home filling in the PET bottle with inert material, get some employment, and that nobody gives you 5 paisa for that little bottle of water. Now it becomes 2.5 rupee equivalent of brick in the wall. So it was done through that. Simple, even this gave them the employment, that thin micron bags braided like the hairdo and now it's a rope, which is a value-added product, fly ash bricks, waste residue bricks, soil block with 5% cement, wooden crate. Wood is very expensive in India, but crate wood being brittle is only used for burning. But you change the detailing, but beading, etc., and it becomes a nice. This is what I was saying. This is the widows of the settlement while sitting at home in the evening could do. And it's a dry city, but enough liquor bottles can be found. You know where to go. Look in the Google, the police stations, and you'll find it. So this becomes the waste jali. This becomes the glowing western one where no amount of overhang would cut down. Filler slab where this inert material could reduce the volume of concrete, and even the digital waste. So again, we did 5 extensions. So client was hesitant, but once they saw it, then they allowed. And every time we added, like even the digital waste pallet got added into newer extension. The metal scrap, the rags sandwiched FRP, this is the door paneling with oil tin container opened up, louvers, ventilators, even the waste from the broken houses becomes a good resource. So these were all demonstrations to show that all these waste is resource in a way. And this is multi-use space. Early morning, it's a classroom. Afternoon, it's a digital literacy for the young girls of the slum to make them as competitive. The crash, where the local nannies take care of the kids or toddlers, where both parents go out for labor and they earn livelihood, kids get taken care of, and it's become a sort of most used social space in the evening and weekends. Reinterpret, this is now a larger campus. You're welcome to visit this when you come. All common sense principle, cut and fill idea so that you get earth burning, you have multiple use space, outdoor multi-courtyard architecture, each courtyard, its orientation and scale makes it 2.2 million liter water harvested, no drop of water from this site goes out. One is the roof water collected in the cistern, the other is the underground percolating well, third is retreated water from the bathroom waste, and biogas also done from the night soil. Where you dug the soil to raise the ground around, where roads come in and you are again sunken. So without import-export of soil, we managed the level higher than the road. And those became a very insulating, passive, cooled areas with earth burning. And again, that is multiple use space. It's very comfortable in certain time. Learning from the traditional architecture, we have, this vertically projecting profile over there. So southwest is the taller, northeast is sunken, and that mutually shades. Southwest is for night, so it's cool then, and northeast is for the day, which again, there's no sun coming. There's a lot of art integrated into this. There's nothing, all this vegetation has come about. In fact, we planted the first tree before even planting the first foundation brick. And now it's a growing and yielding resource. All staircases are different, very ethnic kind of furniture and indoors. That's also done by the Women's Cooperative, which also their sister concern or the NGO kind of operates. So it's all with those concerns of craft, of employment to the craftsmen and women, gender empowerment, and of course the local aesthetics and association. This mud and mirror that we find from desert architecture. Even this water harvesting done through the open pond, which of course microcools, it may evaporate, but that was an irrigation water, and it has now grown into such kind of natural island. Now, restore, coming to settlement scale, the 2 projects, the disaster or the housing for the poor post relocation. This one was one where we did it at Vast Social Foundation. This won the Aga Khan Award. 86 hectares site, 6,500 houses for the urban poor. And the way it was done was that this on the left was what the development authority had proposed. And with all iteration, this is exactly the same quantity, but arguably a very different quality of space, which we learned by research on open spaces, of people's use of spaces, etc., hierarchy of open space. So it was to demonstrate that even poor can have a nicer neighborhood without being extra cost. In fact, This was 20% cheaper than the conventional cost. This neighborhood had footpath and the better facilities than the parent city then. And it was cross subsidization, that certain one third of the space was sold to at a market rate to the more affording, and that was subsidizing the infrastructure costs for the poor. So they enjoyed the same but did not have to pay for that. And this ran into 20 times more applicants than the number of them were available, you know. So I'll just run quickly through some concepts. That pedestrian matrix was the organizer of parcels of open spaces, 1 meter walk to whatever. You can see the diagonal open space from every house to cul-de-sac. It comes to a series of stitched plaza, then it comes to a diagonal green, and that diagonally connects without having to come into the road, into the all environment across. The road brings you outwardly where you are, and the open space bring you inwardly. So it's like a finger-like network of mutually connected but undisturbed by each other, safe sort of spaces. And some of these, you know, it's 86 hectares, the buses, etc., run, but so that they don't zoom up the speed, this band, etc. This is the hierarchy of space that you find, and the plots are north-south oriented, so deep, long houses, but they don't get they're compactly paid. But largest hierarchy, that diagonal green, as you can see, cuts across very safely for children to go. Nodal squares, the series of plazas where convenient shops come in 2 minutes or 1 minute walk. Cul-de-sacs become a safe area for the people, streets, children, and the street doubles up as open space in Indian context. These were the alternative houses removed between some for sanitation to go through, and yet it became a social space, you know, as you can see. Now people maintain it. It doesn't, because now there's a sense of belonging between that neighbor that belongs to us. So they grow, and this is the private backyard. So all range of space from private to between few houses to between the cluster to the street to entire city and settlement, you know. This is how built unbuilt gets complemented. And we build demonstration housing just to, you know, break some norms that authorities had put in, that this single geometry of the plot can still bring in very diverse house forms. So house form variation, you know, so first you can build as much you like. So there is a, you know, incremental growth all the time. You don't want to put right away in the housing the money. And with kit of parts, 4 kinds of staircases with the same production system, different you know, extensions, different kinds of railing and windows, and yet given each one a choice of whatever color they want to identify with. This was what one officer said, and paint everything saffron, so it happened like that. But you would see that people on their own now eventually changed. And these were 72 plots, just demonstrated that each is unique on a same geometric plan, and yet it has not only been unique to look at, but functionally they differ, socially they differ, like whether 2 houses up and down can be split between house brothers, or it could be one integrated extended family house, and so on and so forth. So left-hand side is what the demonstration housing did, and right is what people on their own on an empty lot. It was a site and services project did, and I think even the in between spaces they maintain, they jointly decide what to have, whether cattle shed or a shrine or a shop, and each facade kind of becomes their own. You can see economic difference on the left, that this and this are not the same economic, yet they could coexist. So that was not a barrier to separate out socially one group from the other. And even internally, the flexibility to arrange, they planted this all stuff. So the whole certificate of user satisfaction of, you can see here in the sense of belonging, that even though it was given by a lottery, that people kind of confided in them and they made it their own home. And this one is post-earthquake. We worked this also. We won the United Nations Habitat Award citation for this. These were the people in the in the desert, sorry, never a Scottish settlement. 2001, 26 January, a huge earthquake struck. You saw that destruction. But people were building their own habitat where you could see culture, craft, and architecture so intertwined, one reflected on the other. And the traditional wisdom that nothing happened to this only mud architecture which bank would not consider giving equal asset to give the loan or a, you know, equilateral money. And nothing happened to that for all these scientific reasons. I would not spell them out, but we analyze and they all, you can see that this was one. But next to that, built with newer material in a non-familiar way that they tried to emulate urban blocks and build, gave way. So same place, same impact, but one survived, the other one died. And it was fluke one, fluke two, fluke three, many flukes to be really fluke. There was again a scientific reason. It's just again, like Japan, and we see huge earthquake, but no casualty. Because they've learned over time and therefore perfected a system. That's another thing about vernacular architecture as a reference point, that it has come for the place, by the place, and for the place. So you can see all the factors being taken into account. So this was what we did, a rehabilitation of 18 entire villages over there. And this is the sponsor next to me, that's me, if you can identify through the paunch, not through hair, and all the villagers on the left. So we did in a participatory way because the system overnight disrupted. So we literally simulated that game. First, we played an architect that how about this organic layout? And to which they smirked and say, sorry, I think you might have missed some classes in your architecture. This doesn't work for us. We need this and this. So we wrote the name and said that, okay, who wants to be next to who? So they chose their neighbors, they saw whether it's a linear or what kind of clustering, etc. Our ego was hurt, so we kind of still tried to say that what about this kind of an open space in between where you can have daughter's wedding, you can have temples, the festivity. They said, okay, some classes seem to have been gone in your head. We are okay with that. So we made this sketch, and with theodolite, when the engineers went to plant that, we saw people had already started shifting their stuff to their assigned kind of plots in their own mind. Okay, but they would have gone wrong by meters, but not wrong in understanding who is next to who and where, which direction. So that meant two positive things of rehabilitation: their acceptance of what was happening and their comprehension of what was happening. Then we used that model to show on the side the orientation, etc. But model would not give an idea of a scale. And coming from the miser Ahmedabadi, they said that there's so much of land and you're giving us this much of plot, which was actually 1.5 times their existing largest plot. Still, we were miser Ahmedabadi. So we planted 4 corners of each one plot, and they said, oh, it's that. Maybe you have another river water coming into your city. It's fine with us. Then we used the local material, and we chose a site where the edge of that had a little depression, and we further dredged it. That clay strata became the resource to make this sun-dried, ram-pressed, without electricity, bricks. So 10 youth produced 3,000 block a day, and that they knew how to add plasticizer or fibers. They built their own house, so they would do the best they can and as they want. Youngest of the family learned from the wisdom of the oldest, so this technology or know-how is passed on to the coming generation. And then this was ready in less than 2 months. Each house went through these stages and they dolled it up. And this is not a decor, it's a design in a hot, dry climate and desert climate. First round house against the blizzard, it's 52, so I think it's 120 something plus Fahrenheit. That they would have, and they again continued with their craft. Even this NGO helped them market and learn different kinds of products so that it's marketed all over rather than their local consumption. But as you see, in a hot, dry, and very extreme climate, you don't want big windows to kind of influence negatively. So small aperture, but small aperture should not mean dingy interiors. And therefore, that white clay and the mirror helped as much reflect the light that came in. So this is their beautiful interiors. In fact, this is one of the few surviving and has become a nice touristic place now. So it's also added to their economy. When we went there, the community said, we want apartments in concrete. And we had to convince them in their own way. And now they're earning with homestay and all that because people come there to stay with them, and that's become an additional income for them. Of course, other facilities, intermediate technology, so smokeless stuff so that they don't inhale smoke. Women used to otherwise die of tuberculosis, etc. So the quality of health. And this is not a joke. At least one room gets decentralized electricity at night. And from where we dredged the soil with clay strata in the middle of desert where drought was the name of the game every year. it became a reservoir, and it keeps with clay strata for good number of months. And because of that, without us saying, they started agriculture. Mind you, it's a desert. And when there is water, the culture also flourishes, you know. So because of that citation, we were asked after 10 years to revisit. There's a chapter in United Nations book about the experiences and lessons. And they said that even if it's a failure, we should document that. So many of these are later pictures to revisit and find. And we see that people have well adapted. They've built new, not built apartments on their own. And you can see tradition and modernity. Unfortunately, in India, we made it into a debate as if there are two contradictions, you know. But they can coexist. They maintain their culture, they maintain their lifestyle, and yet they're very quickly adapted. In fact, these houses earlier did not have door-to-door sanitation, and that meant social issue for the women. They had to relieve themselves in the cover of darkness at night, which meant a lot of abuses and many things. So they very quickly adapted to now sanitation option given at the door or the compound itself. So there were improvements, and yet what was required to be constants were kept, you know. And finally, regenerate. This is a memorial for Cadila Pharma, a big pharmacy giant, a pioneer of that. When he passed away in his own factory, his memorial has been put. I won't explain the reasons for this geometry, but it's a cosmo-religious geometry. These are all, as being part of pharmacy, this is all herbal plantation, etc., from a virgin site. This is where he was cremated. There's all kinds of referencing to the, architecture of yesteryears and cosmo-religious diagram of Sri Yantra, etc. A lot of integration of craft, because memorial should inform, involve, and inspire. It's what you take back. It's emotionally engaging, and what it takes you to learn from or pick up from there when you go. So a lot of those have come in, the circumambulation, like you transit and have different layers to come in by the time. So you forget the worldly and come to the spiritual environment. And these are like the temple colonnades, but here they are all the verses of Bhagavad Gita. Water, vegetation, light is the natural element that keeps it changed all the time. It's been a lot of information about culture and craft here. And in seasons it blooms, all from a virgin site, Natural material palette by and large. It's just a 2-minute video to finish. And this is not a drone view, it's just not a simulation, it's actually a drone view. That's the only structure, that's an exhibition that's been built. It's a cardinal east-west, north-south axis ramp. Ramp itself becomes a storyteller about all those highlights that you see are what his life was, important juncture in his life. This is where he's cremated, and water and fire duality. 52 water fountains, they go 20 feet, so the sense of enclosure, and from distance a clue that something is here. A ramp being a barrier-free and accessible. And it's a regressional journey from nature to man-made, because he was nobody. His parents died at the age of 5. He made himself, and he actually invented for India a very cheap medicine for tuberculosis, where his cousin had actually died in the rural area for the want of that. So he made himself that promise that I'll do, and accordingly now he has been known for affordable medicine, etc. So from real planted jungle randomly to sort of semi-cured pathways, and the also depictions of various aspects of mythological stories, etc., to then coming to geometric circle, and then eventually to square and primordial geometry of triangle and square, where he was cremated. So as if he made himself, so nature to man-made is the kind of progression how it goes. A lot of integration of craft and art. Every column is a different depiction, and column has 3 energy zones. So bottom is a bronze kind of casting of the scenario. Middle one on 4 sides have 4 language translation, and top one is a symbolic sculpture. And so are the open air theater. And these are all mudras that come from classical dance as well as dhyan mudras. These are all herbal plants, triangles, planters. So just this is for our, as I say that today when we say past and learn from past, the new generation or people think that it's turning the clock backward. But this is to reaffirm that glamour and beauty both may catch our attention, but glamour, like fashion, is applique and temporal. It fades away in no time, while beauty is integral and timeless. And this is a little conversation between grandpa and grandson. Grandson asks grandpa, "How old are you?" And grandpa replies, "Son, I was born before television, penicillin, polio shots, frozen food, Xerox, contact lens, frisbees, credit cards, laser beams, ballpoint pens, pantyhose, air conditioners, dishwashers, and men hadn't yet walked onto the moon. Your grandmother and I got married first and then lived together. Every family had a father and a mother. We were before computer dating, dual carriers, daycare centers, and group therapy. Our lives were governed by 10 commandments, good judgment, and common sense. Serving your country was a privilege, and living in the country was even bigger pride. We thought fast food was what people ate during the Lent. We never heard of FM radios, tape decks, CDs, electric typewriters, yogurts, or guys wearing earrings. We listened to the news and president speeches on our radios. Pizza Hut, McDonald's, and instant coffee were unheard of. And in my day, Coke was a cold drink, pot was something your mother cooked in, rock music was grandmother's lullaby, aides were helpers in principal's office, cheap meant a piece of wood, hardware was found in a hardware store, and software wasn't even a word. And we were the last generation to actually believe that a lady needed a husband to have a baby. No wonder people call us old and confused and say there is a generation gap. How old you think I am? And maybe younger friends of his would think this was once upon a time in a jungle, primitive man was rubbing the stone to ignite fire, dinosaurs must be moving. All this is 70-year-old. They don't signify the translation of human DNA and human, as we again bring in Corona, we understood how as human we are, that meeting a fellow human could not be substituted by Zoom and the Sky. It was a useful tool, but did not substitute. We broke curfews to meet someone, to go out with vengeance in nature. So again, going back to those two fundamentals. And we think 100 years apart as human beings, we are different. We need to rethink. What changes is fashion, of course. There was a time we had to throw child in the house to do some homework. Now we have to throw him out to go and play. Yes, fashion changes. Every 30 years I become fashionable. We used to chain a dog, now we chain ourselves. There was a technology that brought families together across the world on a dining table, and now on the same dining table, we are each in a different world. What we need are technologies which have humane concept. So it's not wrong with technology, and therefore many of these spontaneous adjustments is what the designer's game is about. Don't go with prefixed ideas. Make it happen and work rather than, that it's sort of a formula to be applied universally every way. We had our own WhatsApps, our own CCTVs, and own surfing. Through design, we can definitely empower, but the goal has to be, or ultimate outcome has to be to improve the quality of life. And in our context, I would say that rather than giving Gandhian currency the value, let's make Gandhian value the currency. Mantra for us, inspire because of 4,000 years of accumulated wisdom, inspire from yesterday, aspire for tomorrow. So welcome to traverse in the immensity of time and space, of notion and reality. Thank you for your patient listening and giving me this chance. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
That was inspiring, really fascinating introduction.
Thank you.
And if we can, I guess we'll ask some questions.
I would be more glad to know that.
We always have Alexander there from Head High still with his books, but in the meantime, I'd like to say that was like very fascinating to look at the breadth and depth of all that. So much inspiration. There was like government, there was culture, there was history, there was everything that we were talking about at the introduction. And I'm wondering, because you've been here now in New York for just a couple of weeks more.
Yes.
I wonder, in looking at what you're experiencing here in New York, are there some spaces that you've noticed that kind of send you back to the topics of tonight?
Sure.
Things you thought about?
Sure. No, as I said that, you have to see the outcome from each context. What I reflect by the glazed building is for the warm climate, which might be of value maybe to some extent in the cold climate to bring in light, daytime illumination. So it just shows that what is appropriate is what you need to go for rather than as a standardized formula of just what is good and what is not good. What I loved, and I keep saying that, is that it broke the notion which we perceive by whatever kind of visual, notions of being a tall building, concrete jungle, etc. That is the last kind of thing to perceive, because there are many, many public spaces every now and then, from Washington Square to Union Square, whatever, and which I think we need to learn from, and democratic spaces. I never saw any which was monopolized by a corporate or, was any government or like that. Each one was for everyone to use, just right now this whole New York University convocation group was using it. So from there to everybody. So I think that notion of it being just a sky city versus, I think it's most pedestrian friendly city. And that's what we keep talking about, street architecture in India. But now overwhelming presence of car has died the spirit of streets, which used to be pedestrian oriented and friendly. But I think here there's enough of that traffic and cars being accommodated. We haven't learned the art of one way. Even the smallest lane we would try to go like that. So I think there is a way to plan things. There is a lot of role from India in terms of organicity. Like here again, I compare that thanks to those lot of informal eateries out there, falafel and halal meat and whatnot. I think it substitutes, and that's what New York is New York, and that's what I say, that it's not as sanitized as, sorry if I'm not insulting any, but Dubai, which to me is a concrete jungle, and you don't, at a street level, experience the humane part of it, while here every place was that. I loved the, 9/11 memorial. As I say, memorial is for you to interpret, and I think I saw a lot of kind of, substance in the simple way that it has been put up. I also saw people actually putting the memorabilia and the flowers into the slots over there. So it was not just touristic place, but it could touch your emotion, and it could talk about the voids that is left with, and yet taking a revenge that you are now the tallest building next to that. So you're not going to be bogged down by the, suppression, etc. So I think that was very nice there. And I have always liked, we talked earlier, that Washington Memorial of the Veterans, Maya Lean structure, Vietnam War Memorial, that just simplicity of elements, just two walls and a sloping ground. And I think even being non-familiar to the history, it touched me so much, and I use it in my classes to tell about emotionally engaging architecture, that it's interactive, that it has kind of ideas about things, the way it makes you move, way just satire pointing two fingers at two important places, that who is responsible to you reflected in the glossy one to say that what am I doing? Am I a mute spectator? Etc. So I think there's a lot that you, even as an outsider, can read through that. But the credit goes to, with simple two wall and an inclined floor, I have yet to see with such frugality, such an engaging and emotionally charged space. So I think those are some of the things that you pick up and learn. And I think what I also find is that human beings are similar. I mean, not only they're friendly in the human place, but they also like to go out. Weekend is very different than weekdays in terms of very much using the outdoors, being with nature. Suddenly the sun comes and the dressing changes. I might be wearing the same every day, but I think looking out of the window, I should realize that what is the forecast for the weather today. So being with nature in that sense, rather than being slave of nature. So I think those are the kind of things that always one can learn from each other likewise. And that's what I carry back for myself.
Yeah, that's great. Those are two very moving examples, the 9/11 and Washington Vietnam Memorial. And one of the other things that I think that you probably experienced also on your trip here was the retro use of public space that got disassociated, which you had some examples of in India as well, where all of a sudden you reconvert it to something useful that brings people together. And one thing I'm thinking about is the Highline experience.
Oh, yes, that was amazing. Yes, I did walk on that. That was on the, very true, good reminder that. Yeah.
And I wonder, because there's a use where it was disused, it was only people who actually risked being vagrants up there and being arrested for being up there. Now all of a sudden it has a
value to
the city and a place for the public to come.
No, and that's another thing. Again, same thing. We say, we know that New York is an island, landlocked place, high density, and yet to find spaces like that, not demolish High Line and put something else, which would be the most logical or arguably convincing thing to do, and yet nobody has touched Battery Park, Central Park, all these Pele Park or whatever that they are. And I don't know if, but Mr. James Baluardo from here was a friend, and he used to tell that during Mr. Bloomberg's time, I think he was one of the resource persons to study and bring about recommendations of what could be transformed. And after 17 years, when I come, I see a lot of those positive value additions being at least apparent to me right now. So I think that whole idea of do something after due consideration and research, prioritize things basically for people and human rather than for car and the machine, even though technologically this place might be dependent on machine, but I think it has a place for the people in the front. So I think those things make me appreciate being here.
Yeah, one of the things that was very interesting in your examples up there was your diagram of the 15-minute walk, which we have like a 15-minute city that we think about here.
Public transport is another that we need to learn from,
And making things dense enough that we can experience the things that we need within a walk of 5-10 minutes is all part of active design, which is another one of our initiatives. And I wonder how you think that your experience here sees that similarity between which in that diagram and also Corbusier's diagram.
But I was only going to say it's New York, not America. The Houston is, I think, I hate, or that's totally opposite.
Houston's
that even for a milk, you have to take a car and go out, and there's 30 miles to go and come back, and that's a different model. That's where I used to appreciate Europe to be closer cousin to us. They rely on public transport. They've not lost their language, food habits, festivities, and all. But I think New York has still maintained that being New Yorker means what and being New York meaning what. I think that's an exception in the overall landscape of maybe partly Chicago, but not as much. Not that I'm sitting in New York, I'm saying, but that's what.
So I'd like to open up if there's any questions. I don't know if we have a microphone around there, but if there's a questions, maybe there is, Salmata has a microphone and there's a question right there.
Hi, Yatin. Thank you so much for your talk. I've been a big fan of your work.
Oh my God.
I'm originally from Mumbai, so been a big fan of the drawings. Studying that back in undergrad. I've been here for 10 years, and every time I go back to India, there's a certain nervousness that comes to my mind. It's like how quickly it's changing and how some of these are very small offshoots of how quickly things are changing. And one example of that is the DMIC, the Delhi Mumbai Industrial Corridor, where they're actually making 7 to 10 cities from the ground up. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. It coming less from architects and more from administrative engineers, and how do you feel about it? Because I feel nervous about it, and I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I think growth is inevitable, but point is that after due consideration, see which land to do, what kind of growth, and development. For example, it's ironical in India that suburbs become taller. While everywhere else, it's the downtown, which work area is taller, and this suburb is a livable environment. In India, it's exactly the opposite. And on one hand, you go 30 kilometers for the kind of neighborhoods, and on the other, you find taller and taller buildings. So we've lost both ways. That's what I'm trying to say. So the point is, what kind of development are we promoting? What, for example, just as I have been, writing, or at least trying for myself to think that, is it always the curse and the criticism, or there's an answer? And couple of answers, again from here, and I used to compare it with Europe. I'm a big fan of development and the model there for development. One is decentralization. We make Bruhad Mumbai and yet mega and macro and God knows what Mumbai. Why Mumbai should be one entity? Why South Mumbai? The Kolaba is a city. Like you have boroughs, and each borough is sort of can say administrative self-sufficient. If and another good idea that you can only go to a neighborhood school or regional school only. So you don't have to commute for school that much far and whatnot. Here, parents take them to 2 kilometers away. They have stationed themselves in a big villa 20 kilometers far. So if we do new places, can we not think them as a 15-minute walk? Can that be not self-sufficient with all that it needs? So at least those who manage to find their living, at least for day-to-day things, you don't have to commute farther, So likewise, and I've made one comparison, very quick comparison, so anybody can correct me and challenge me. But from Amsterdam to Rotterdam in Netherlands, I think it's about 70 kilometers a mile, something like that. And every 8th minute in a public transport, you come to another city, Hague and Delft and in between another. Now, each city has its own character, has its own geography, as well as its own economy. And each city is reached within 8 minutes of public transport, but within that city, it's 15 minutes walk really from one end to the other. Now, it is exactly or nearly the same as linear city of Mumbai. And that's what I say, why could that not be 7 circles rather than one from, people commute 2.5 hours from Vashi to Kolaba and Kolaba to Vashi, and car is even worse than the kind of train which is a surviving or a saving grace in Mumbai. So if we plan satellite cities, and I would say finger-like, so this is still agriculture or green, and this is one. So you don't eat up the palleable land or a cultivable land or a edible landscape going, so that what you grow here you can directly consume there. Instead, we make circles and circles and circles, I think what model of development and the kind of city plan we use is where the smartness lies.
Great. Well, I think that, there's another question. Okay.
Hi. I've been to a lot of lectures here, but you have packed the most information into 90 minutes than any lecture I've ever been to. I really appreciate that. It's been so long since I've been to India, but I was in Ahmedabad and some of the surrounding communities about 26 years ago. And I'm curious about not just that region, but all over the country. Is the Indian government and local municipalities sensitive to the value of their inner cores? You mentioned, I think they're called the poles or the tolls in Ahmedabad. And then I also remember visiting, I think, Junagadh, just nearby, and just being fascinated by that old town. And I documented, photographed it. Of course, they stole my film when I went to the shipwrecking site. But to get to my point, I said, this needs to be documented and sustained. Does the local and national government recognize the values of those core communities and will try to preserve them? Because I saw in China, when I went there, they're just mowing down those old walking districts.
I would say, like many government documents, on paper, yes, in reality, questionable. For example, Ahmedabad 2017 was recognized as a living heritage. So whole city of Fort Wall area has been recognized as UNESCO city, a heritage city. I have been asked to be in some meetings, not that I'm part of committee, but I think they don't have mechanism in place, or neither they fully understand the difference between lived in heritage, as I was saying, versus a monument. See, monument, you put piece by piece together and preserve accordingly. While lived in heritage, you have to understand it's about the lifestyle. For example, even in the poor, you would not find more than 150-year-old house, or it is not still mud roofs, okay? They have changed to jacquard flooring and whatnot, and yet the spirit of that did not change. So unfortunately, in the name of conservation, they come up with the stupid thing of even structurally, the wooden log must be only with which you must replace. Now that's forbiddingly expensive, and that's what is challenging many people to even upgrade their house and whatnot. So I think they will still have mechanism in the place, and neither there is a full understanding and a will. For example, the traffic, the infrastructure. So I think to conserve that, the first thing you have to do is that put it in the good quality of life, and therefore the right infrastructure, reduce the traffic that is unduly inundating there. It's not, we had done some, about 12 years ago, some study, and we found that even if you see the cars parked, they're not from the local neighborhoods. It is just the empty street of the residential neighborhood, which during daytime, because they have moved out, is available, and then outside people put in. Not only that, the tertiary street would have a kind of a go down because it's a cheap accommodation. And now go down means that in a tertiary street commercial vehicle, the tempo and the traveler would go there, which is not even helping the neighborhood, you know. So we had to come up with guidelines saying that certain functions can only come about certain hierarchy of road. You can make one-way movement, this thing. You know, like we had a great planner in Indore many decades ago, Patrick Geddes, and he coined the term selective surgery. So I think what we need to do is not a blanket rule, but selective surgery that take region by region, and somewhere even open the plot, which you have now the opportunity to create open space, as well as you know what to preserve and what not. So in principle, conservation and heritage has been in the government list of things, but I don't think there's a great example to go by, you know. They've started with few mechanisms like transfer of development rights. So for example, the owner of that plot should not suffer from the possible economic gain of the real estate appreciation. So he can keep the building, but extra FAR, he can sell it to the developer in an area where it can be used additionally and likewise. So I think it's in a nascent state for them to first grasp the mechanics of the dynamics of the lived in heritage and then come up with that, you know. So many buildings I have documented. Unfortunately, it's a shame that I'm saying not with the, and I mean, I should be proud of that, but unfortunately, I'm just telling you the fact. More houses got broken down post announcement of the heritage status, because some tout would have, you know, started a rumor that now it is that, you won't be able to do this, nobody would buy it, nobody can develop this. So people in a rush removed a lot of houses. And second, some fell down with the label of heritage status, but government did nothing, you know. So not give them incentive, not give them technical advice, not do anything. And it has fallen down, you know. So I have pictures of more houses getting down, unfortunately, then. And also what is happening is that public spaces where children used to play, cows used to be hung. I'm not saying go back to that, but at least it should be in the domain of the people. Instead now it's become a car parking, you know. So even when you say it's a lived in heritage, was for the way of life. It is the way morning, afternoon, evening life came in there. That's also changing. And so is the gentry, the user group, because people are now pushing out from the old city, and some other not really belonging to that kind of a way of life are coming in, including ethnicity. Okay, for example, it was a lot of jewelers, and they had the assistant coming from Bengal. So now all those local community housing is being taken over by the Bengalis. Nothing wrong with Bengalis, but their way of life may not necessarily be the same, and they start putting the shops across, so it's not the street with the residential extension of old, grandma sitting on a platform talking to with balcony to a girl who is combing the hair. So I think some of those dynamics are beginning to lose, and then one wonders if we just preserve the building, is it enough? Is it going to be the same city and the heritage, or it would be just few buildings, monuments?
Well, lots to think of there, and that was great interchange. We're running out of time, so I want to leave the 5 minutes or 6 minutes we have left so you can maybe buy some books and have Yatin sign them for you here and schmooze a little bit before the venue closes at 8 o'clock. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much. It's been learning for me too. Thank you.